You're listening to the GeekWatch Podcast, Episode 20, Geek Celluloid Wonderland, plus on this week's What the Dead, Worth.
This is the GeekWatch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 20 of the GeekWatch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, GeekWatch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hi, Brian. We have reached Venti.
We're going to talk about The Walking Dead, of course, today. But before we get started with that, this is an interesting time for geeks because we are now getting into very close to a celluloid wonderland when it comes to geek movies. We are just 2 weeks away from Avengers Infinity War, which is the end of April. After that, we have the Solo movie in May. We also have Deadpool 2 in May. And so we're now getting a nice cluster of geek-centric movies. If you're a horror fan, we've already been treated to A Quiet Place, which I haven't seen yet.
Me either, and I really, really want to.
I have been hearing such good things about this movie. I can't wait.
I know.
Right at this point, it is the number one movie. Stephen King gave a really glowing review of it. And so I'm looking forward to seeing this film a great deal. And hopefully I'll get a chance to check it out this weekend because obviously in the next couple of weeks or so, we're going to be busy.
Yeah.
So there'll be a lot of films to watch. But they just released the trailer for Meg.
Yes. I'll be honest, the idea of this, thinking, okay, so they took a sci-fi film like Sharknado, and now they're making a real movie from a sci-fi film.
Well, I know it's based off a series of books. And watching the trailer, you do get the idea that you're getting a combination of really scary film, but at the same time, you're getting some comedy, you're getting some light moments. And I'm not exactly sure where it's going to fall, although if you saw Get Out, that both of those things can work very well in a movie. It's difficult to pull off. I would say that in the hands of somebody who's very masterful, the troubles that you can run into with having comedy and horror in the same movie, they can overcome them and actually allow both of those to help strengthen each other. And Jason Statham is the lead in this film, and I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of everything that he's done. I have to say that
Dungeon Siege.
Well, I have to say the movies that I like him in the most, they're the movies that he did with Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
And
Revolver and Snatch and
Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Those were the movies that I really liked him in. And some of the other stuff he did in America, not the biggest fan of.
Transporter or
Crank.
Crank.
Those films, not really my cup of tea.
Italian Job?
Well, why do you want to remake that movie? While we're at that, let's remake Citizen Kane. But still, I mean, I've liked him in some movies, not a lot of his American movies. Like I said, the Guy Ritchie films, I've been a big fan of. I do want to see what he does in this film. I'm intrigued by the film.
Have you read the book?
I've not read the book.
I'm
not, again.
But as I understand, Jaws was also a novel.
Right.
Yeah. And
Peter Benchley. But what's interesting, of course, is that the novel and the movie really diverge in a lot of major ways.
Okay.
For one, and you've seen Jaws, I assume, the movie.
But I have not read the book.
Right. Well, there's a subplot in the book where Hooper has an affair with Brody's wife.
Huh.
And I'm not exactly sure why that they had to do that, but it happens in the book. Thank goodness it didn't happen in the movie. The other thing, too, is that the ending of the book is much different than the ending of the movie. And in the movie, Brody shoots the air tank that explodes.
You son of a... Yeah.
In the book, well, basically, the shark dies of exhaustion. They chase him and they chase him. He chases them, and then suddenly he gets really tired and dies.
Huh.
And would not have played as well on screen, I think.
Yeah, I think it would have been like the ending of Duel, the first Steven Spielberg movie, I think it was made for TV.
Right.
Yeah, that entire movie, we just get flammable. That's all you know of the truck, that it's flammable. And then it goes over the side of a cliff and nothing happens.
Right. Well, and then, of course, Jaws.
Yeah, let's have an explosion. That should have been the explosion at the end of Duel.
But getting back to Meg, that's going to be a mixed bag. It could be glorious or it could be just a train wreck, and I'm not sure which yet. I'm going to probably have to go to the theater to find out, but it's going to at least get my money. At least once. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
But
like, are we going to get 2018's Jaws, or are we going to get a just bigger budgeted Sharknado? That's what we'll have to see.
yeah, whatever they manage to pull off, looks like there's going to be some really good, very tense scenes, and there looks like there'll be some good humor in there also.
I jumped in the trailer when the no, not the Kraken. What are they in real life? What's a Kraken in real life?
Oh, you're talking about the giant squid.
The squid, yes, the giant squid, the the very 10,000 leagues under the sea when it grabs the. I jumped, and I was just watching it on a phone. So
I think it's going to be some serious over the top fun. I'm hoping for the best, definitely, and we'll be checking it out. But we've got a lot of interesting movies that are going to be coming up in the next few. And
Rampage opens.
Yes, opens
tonight.
I think it does. I think it does open tonight.
And
that's going to be a crazy go nuts film. And it'll be interesting to see how well that it does. Of course, at this point, Black Panther is number 5 because they've done the re-release of Dunkirk after the Oscars, and that came in at number 2. Quiet Place got number 1. What was number 3? I'm trying to think what else has been out. That's Ready Player One's number 3. And after that was Blockers, the comedy.
Yeah, the kids, the teen comedy. It was like
right, the teen/adult comedy.
It's like the 10 Things I Hate About You of our generation, I guess,
right.
Or American Pie. I don't know.
Yeah, it's half that, but it's also half messing with the parents. Because the parents are trying to stop.
All movies.
Yeah, pretty
Every
much.
single movie you mess with the parents. The parents are always wrong. The parents never know better.
Definitely not. I guess, or at least in this movie, that's sort of the theme going.
Most movies.
Yeah. So. Then Black Panther's at number 5, and what I find interesting about this is that there's a good possibility that Black Panther is still be in the top 10 when Infinity War starts out. So
you could do a double feature.
You could do a double
Black
feature.
Black Panther and Black Panther 2. I mean, Infinity War.
Oh, I'm fine with calling it Black Panther 2. I want more of that.
Yes.
And as like I said before, it seems from the trailers that Wakanda is going to be pretty much the third act. Part of the second act, but maybe the main third act of the movie. And that's where the final stand's going to be against Thanos. And I'm really looking forward to this film. We've been waiting for a long, long time. I knew I would like Black Panther, and I thought at least it would be a nice aperitif before Infinity War. What I didn't expect was it was going to be a huge meal.
Yeah.
And hugely satisfying.
Perfect movie. Well, what Mandy thinks is the perfect movie. I know not everyone agrees with me.
Well, I certainly enjoyed the heck out of that film.
We have 2 perfect movies so far in, over 120 years of making films, and we're working on it.
Cool. So what do you consider the other perfect movie?
Tombstone.
I'm
sorry, I thought we had talked about this before.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
My stuff kind of leans more obscure. My favorite movie, I don't know if I would go so far as to call it the perfect movie, although I could debate that it is. My favorite movie is Mishima, Life in 4 Chapters. And it's a very obscure film. It was a Japanese film that was produced by George Lucas. This may be a film I'm going to have to subject you to eventually.
Okay. Well, and being ADHD is I don't have favorites of anything. Because it's constantly changing and I can't concentrate on one thing. People ask me my favorite food. I'm like, what's a favorite food? I like
it's like what
foods.
You got.
Yeah, there's, I like all foods and I like so many movies. I like all movies and.
Right.
Yep.
What's really interesting about Mishima was a real person. He was a Japanese writer. They called him the Japanese Shakespeare. And this is not going to be a spoiler, even though this is what happens at the end of the movie, because they tell you right at the beginning of the movie that this happens. Is along with his writing, he also formed what he called the Shield Society, which in a sense was kind of a private army. It was for young men. And he would teach them military. This was after, of course, World War II. Because that they lost the war, they were forced in treaty to disband their army. To this day, Japan doesn't have a standing army. And Mishima, he was very much into the samurai aesthetic. And Bushido was his philosophy. And he felt that Japan had lost their way. And so he felt that the Shield Society was going to be the way to come back to Bushi, that it was going to be how the Japanese soul could be restored. And one day he and 4 members of the Shield Society go onto a military base. And they'd been allowed on military bases all the time. They were even allowed to train with what at that point would have been their National Guard. Mm-hmm. And so, after he goes onto the base, he basically kidnaps the base commander, holds him hostage.
Oh, wow.
And he demands that he be allowed to address the garrison. And he delivers a speech to the garrison. And after he delivers the speech, he goes back into the building and commits seppuku. Mm-hmm. He takes the sword and in a ritual disembowelment commits suicide. Mm-hmm. And this actually happened. There really is a Mishima, and he actually did that, and he actually committed suicide, which is one reason why they don't talk about him a lot in Japan anymore. It's an interesting film because the 4 chapters are basically Mishima plays. The cinematography is very much, it looks like they're on a stage.
Okay. And
there's a lot of really clever things going on. And a combination of black and white and color, and plus a lot of these plays that he wrote really were indicative of things that were going on in his life and things he was thinking about philosophically. And of course, the last story is Mishima delivering the speech and then committing seppuku. And fascinating film. To tell you how much this film meant to me, I owned it on VHS tape.
Aww.
And back then, that film was not really popular. Not a lot of people knew about it. Mm-hmm. I learned about it from a roommate, and I was fascinated by this film, so much so, in fact, and keep in mind, back in those days, I was working fast food and trying to get myself through college, mm-hmm. and all of that, and this is like the late 80s, 88, 89, mm-hmm. and the VHS tape cost $60. And I spent the $60 and got it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's how much that movie meant to me. Right. Now, of course, I owned it on Blu-ray. It was released by Criterion Collection because Criterion Collection is awesome, and they always bring out the awesome films. And not only did they release Mishima, but they also released a movie called Patriotism that Mishima starred in.
Oh, himself.
He starred in himself, so you see him. And what's interesting about that movie is the main character at the end
commits.
Exactly.
Wow. So does the Blu-ray have some good extras? Does it have commentary?
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, and it also has something. It also has something else that it had lost for a while because when it went from VHS to a DVD, mm-hmm. they changed the English commentary. There was English commentary throughout the movie. There's like narration in English. Now, whenever any of the characters speak, they speak in Japanese and you have subtitles. But there was an English narration that went through it, and they got a new narrator, which I didn't think was quite as good. But put it back in the Blu-ray. Now, here's the thing, and here's our circle. The person who they had doing the English narration in the original was also known for playing a certain role in Jaws. Sheriff Brody. Roy Scheider.
Wow.
Roy Scheider was the narration in the movie.
Huh. Boy, he's done, God, he did all that jazz. He's just all over the place. Dude.
Absolutely. And
he's about as versatile as Hugh Jackman, I think.
Yes. And there we go. Get back to Jaws. So there's our circular trip.
Back to Jaws. Okay.
The circle of life. And so with that said, it's now time for What the Dead. And for anyone listening, of course, there's going to be spoilers. We're going to talk spoilers on this. We're going to talk about the episode, what happens in the episode. And so if you haven't seen this week's episode, which is Worth, then turn everything off, watch it, then you can come back.
Okay, so Brian, this episode is called Worth. Mm-hmm. I, however, feel that it should be retitled My College Years because it was full of bad decisions. Yeah. Now, I get every episode of Walking Dead is full of bad decisions, or otherwise we wouldn't have a plot. But this one, it was like they were stocking up for winter on bad decisions. Yes. Everyone, Brian.
I can't argue that at all. And one thing I do have to say, and we've been talking about this for a while, is, of course, next week's episode is the season finale. Mm-hmm. And they have been saying in all the commercials that next week is the end of the war. It comes to a head. The war ends next week. And I'm wondering how. Mm-hmm. because...
Is it a special? Is it a 2-hour? Do we know that?
I don't think it's 2 hours. I
No.
mean, it's going to be a longer episode. I don't see how it couldn't be. But at the same time, man, they still have a lot of things to cover. I mean, the stage has been set. Mm-hmm. And I got to be honest, they say it's going to be the end of the war, but I don't see how that's going to be. As I suspect we're going to have a major cliffhanger of some aspect. Mm-hmm. And besides the fact that they're supposed to get to the end of the war, but they're also going to need to explain Morgan leaving. Mm-hmm. Because the season opener for Fear the Walking Dead deals with Morgan.
Right. And
him joining up with that crew.
Yeah, and there's a cowboy in that for some reason. I don't watch Fear the Walking Dead, but I saw the commercial, and there's a cowboy in it.
Texas.
I guess so.
So, and of course, this weekend, this Sunday, the season finale of Walking Dead and the season opener for Fear the Walking Dead are both going to play in the theater back to back. And so there has to be some sort of continuity between these two episodes, which means there's got to be some sort of explanation about Morgan.
He's just going to go on crazy walkabout. I mean, they've been setting that up.
Yeah, he's going to go clear.
He's going crazy again, so we're going to go on crazy walkabout.
But that's a lot to cover in one episode on top of everything else.
Like 10 states and 2 time zones over to get
But
to
I
Texas.
have a feeling that whatever cliffhanger they're going to have for the next episode, it's going to deal with these visions we've been having of Rick lying against a tree, bloody, the stained glass hanging from the branches. That's got to have something to do with whatever cliffhanger they have going for us. And so, and I'm probably going to wind up watching it in the theater. If for no other reason, then it gives me the opportunity of watching it without commercials, without having to fast forward through the commercials. Nice. And also because I do want to get the opportunity of seeing this with an audience, because one thing I'd like to talk about next week when we talk about this season finale is going to be the audience reaction, because that's going to be a huge part of it, and I do want to know that. But getting back to Worth.
I don't even know where to start with these bad decisions.
Because you have on the one side Negan dealing with his Simon problem. And it pretty much ended the way that we figured it was.
Yep. Caesar got Brutus before.
Yeah. Like we had said before, everybody who was tied in with Simon, they had their backs to the wall. You know, once everything kind of went south, they all wind up dying. Of course, there's no way that wasn't going to happen. And Simon, he gets saved for last, and Negan decides to go trial by combat, which I see why he did that, because he needs to strengthen his resolve with everyone in the sanctuary. And because of that, if you just kill off Simon, people are going to always be asking if
maybe he was right.
Or at least to say that, well, maybe Simon could have taken him, and you've got to know. And so Negan, definitely, with everything he'd been through, he was taking a major risk. He had just gotten out of a huge fight with Rick, and I know he was still hurting from a lot of that. And Simon was no panty waste. He certainly knew how to fight.
Just bare hands.
And the fact that Negan choked him to death. And then, of course, Simon winds up on the wall as a zombie, as a walker. That was...
It's a very hyper zombie. I don't know if it's because he was fresh or what. But
I would think it's because he was fresh.
Or if it was just his personality.
Yeah. A lot of that had to do with Dwight's betrayal of him, because he could certainly read the tea leaves about all of that. And, of course, that nice little twist, and it answered the question, who got into the car? And, of course, who got in the car was the one woman that knew what Dwight had done at the hilltop. I do have to say, when Negan was talking to Dwight after he dismissed all his other generals and said, you just keep doing what you know is right. You just follow your gut. And I was like, uh-oh. Oh, this isn't good. And Dwight should have gotten the idea something was going on, because he was acting that way in front of Simon, and Simon had been rousted, and Negan knew what had happened. And Dwight had to know that Negan knew at that point. Or at least if afterwards he, whenever he ratted out Simon, how Negan reacted to Simon after that was very much the way that Negan was reacting to Dwight. And it should have thrown up some sort of a red flag. But that moment when he made him the right-hand man, I'm like, oh no, he's going to open the door, something bad's going to happen, what is it? And when he opened the door and it was that woman, I was like, okay, there we go. That explains the whole thing. So, of course, now Dwight, he's screwed.
To him.
He's screwed. He got played by Negan, and Negan has set up a trap for Rick and the gang.
Right. And it's not helping at all that they tried to kidnap Eugene. And
I will say that Rosita graduated with honors from the Rick Grimes School of HR. It's like every time, and this has been for a while, every time she talks to Eugene, she's always saying the wrong stuff. There was a point there where Eugene was talking about, hey, look, I didn't want to do any of this stuff. I thought that when I admitted to making the bullet that I was going to get killed, but I did it to save you. You know, he's basically, in that point, he's trying to kind of lay foundation of saying, look, I realize I've kind of screwed up. I'm willing to deal with all this stuff, but I am willing to kind of go back to the way things were.
Yeah, and she just said, yeah, we're bringing you home.
But no, she had to roll in and saying, we're going to stick you in the deepest, darkest hole. We're not going to kill you. We're just going to use you. The same kind of brutal stuff that she said to him make the bullet in the first place. The problem was Eugene had had a taste of what it was like not to be afraid of being valued. And he decided, fine, if that's the way it's going to be, I'm done with y'all.
Yep.
And he winds up throwing up on Rosita to distract her long enough to run away. He had seen that the walkers were coming, so he knew that he could get some distance, and he was able to lose them in the ash pit, which I thought was kind of weird, because it's like Daryl's with them. Daryl's his incredible tracker, and suddenly now he can't. He just lost. You know, there had to be footprints. There had to be something. It's a big pile of ash. How did he?
Yeah.
I mean, if Eugene had brushed up against a plant, he'd have been able to see that.
Yeah.
But he couldn't get him through a big field of ash. He couldn't see one footprint. I don't know. But the thing, when Eugene gets back and he's extra driven.
Gosh, yeah.
He's extra driven because before he's like, look, we're just going to make as many bullets as we can make. Obviously, we're not going to be able to reach the quota, but let's give them what we can give them. And then he gets back, he says, well,
yeah.
He says, we're going to give them everything that they want. Buy ginger, he said. And I was like, oh, he really said that? Buy ginger? I don't want to be remembering Abraham right now. It's like, he'd be real ashamed of you, my man. But he said, buy ginger, we're going to do it. And I'm like, oh boy. That hurt.
Gene,
that was painful. We're talking about bad mistakes. Rosita handled this about the worst way you can handle it. And Eugene was right. If it wasn't for Rosita doing what she did, pulling off that stupid stunt of hers, I mean, she was as close to Negan as you could get and missed.
Yeah, just like Rick. They're all shooting like shooting like stormtroopers. Can't
do
anything.
Eugene puts himself in a situation where obviously they're going to kill him to save her, and boy, does she appreciate that. And he brings that up, and suddenly she's going back to her old messed up ways of, let's trash Eugene. We have just a few days, and then we'll see what they do.
We'll see.
We will see. And so, with that, we come to another episode of the GeekWatch Podcast.
Number 20.
And so, for Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher reminding you that we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.